This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. It's episode 268 of the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. I'm Jamie Bogner, and I am in my hometown of Orlando, Florida today. Sitting across from me is Garrett Ward from Sideward Brewing. Welcome to the podcast, Garrett.
Welcome back.
I love these opportunities to highlight my old hometown of Orlando. It's such a cool thing to watch the beer scene develop, watch high quality breweries kind of gain a foothold. You guys are about 3 years old right now,
Coming up on 4, yeah.
Yeah, 4, and you're located, really in a triangle of between places that I used to live.
Yeah, right in the heart of it.
Right. And I've been to the brewery a few times, just hanging out with my brother-in-law when I was in town, but back before we had any conversation. But you sent us some IPA back for our IPA issue this year, and back in May or so. And I remember tasting it and thinking, damn, this is good. And that was a point where I think we started emailing and had arranged to talk at some point, probably this Christmas.
Yeah.
And it was like felt like I was planning way ahead on that one.
It helps as you get older to plan far ahead.
Sure. But then it came up that my Winter Park High School class of 1992 reunion, 30th reunion is this weekend. And so I decided to pop down here. Figured we might as well have a conversation about brewing, while I was here. And so we're here. It's Bumby in the Milk District of Orlando, a small brewery, 1,200-ish barrels or so. Most of it's sold over the bar here. You make a lot of IPAs because IPAs are great. And
we love them. We tend to make a lot of them.
Also playing in the lager space and making some more traditional styles to kind of complement that and keep drinkers happy. We're going to talk about all those things, definitely talk about some of the exploration in IPA, pushing on thiols, pushing on advanced hop products, finding ways to wring flavor out while also still building balanced beers with a significant amount of bitterness to help complement those sweeter, juicier, fun, fruity flavors. We're going to talk about all of that, but first, for nearly 30 years, G&D Chillers has set the mark for quality equipment you can rely on. G&D stands above the rest as the only chiller manufacturer that engineers your glycol piping for free. G&D also stands alone as the only chiller manufacturer with an in-house team of installers and engineers with 30 years of real-world field labor experience in breweries, wineries, and distilleries. Contact the Total Glycol System Design experts today at gdchillers.com. Also, are you ready to brew like a pro? ProBrew has the equipment, systems, and technology to take your brewery to the next level. Check out www.probrew.com for info on patented ProCarb inline carbonation technology, ProFill rotary filling and seaming can fillers, the Alchemator inline alcohol separation system, 7 to 50 barrel brew houses, and more. ProBrew, a subsidiary of Technoblend, now a Promoc brand, offers the craft beer industry innovative solutions to help you brew like a pro. Go to www.probrew.com for more info. Garrett, give me the story of Sideward. Yeah, you've been brewing around these parts for a while now, and
coming up on a decade almost.
Yeah.
The story of Sideward is it's me, my partner Mandy, and my brother Austin. We've kind of all been in a separate space, working for different breweries, different restaurants, and we kind of saw an opportunity to maybe do it our way, maybe do it a little bit different, and we decided to go all in and do it ourselves.
In your personal career arc, where'd you catch the craft beer bug? What was that kind of seminal moment for you? And then how did you decide to then pursue a career in brewing?
I think it was just one of those things you kept searching out and looking for different things. But we got a hold of beer. We got a hold of some beer, but a cliche story. Manny bought me a homebrew kit, and it's all been downhill from there. Yeah.
She just bought you a homebrew kit.
It was a birthday present.
Sure.
And I think it was just, I've always enjoyed the space of food and cooking and always trying to figure out how to make it better. And the home brewing I tell people all the time, it's a very tough hobby. So the first few brews were good, but it's like, I think we can make this better.
Mm-hmm.
Here we are.
So then what pathway did that arc take? When'd you get your first start in professional brewing?
So longtime guy, Ron Rake, was kind of like one of the only guys in town. There was maybe a handful of homebrewers and some clubs, but I just kind of kept bugging him. He was working for Shipyard at the time. They had a brew pub
That's right.
here.
Ron, because I talked to Charles from Broken Strings, and he mentioned Ron also.
Yeah, he was.
It's fun to watch these, like, these kind of centers of influence and how those things like branch out and the influence that certain people have.
Such a small town that Orlando Brewing existed, and they kind of had their thing, but there was really only just a few guys in town. So Ron was kind of like the best of the best, and just kept bugging him and knocking down his door until he finally said, "Come and wash kegs." So that's when he was at Ravenous Pig. So he left Ravenous Pig, and that's when he left it to me, and kind of helped transition that to where Larry is now.
So what happened? So Ravenous Pig, is a gastropub and brewery in Winter Park. What's the story of Ravenous Pig?
It was just kind of one of those first restaurants that just kind of made a mark on the foodie scene, and was just kind of American gastropub. So they had all American craft beer, and just was doing a higher elevated food for what this town had seen before.
And then they put a brewery in to make their own beer.
Yep. And then just kind of that progression.
So you did some time there?
Yes, that was my first pro. I was there for about a year and a half altogether, and then left there to start a brewery out in Winter Springs, which is now defunct. But yeah, and that's kind of where
Red Cypress is that brewery. Okay,
yes.
I remember having some of their beer from time to time. Yeah,
that's where I really just cut my teeth and learned a lot.
Yeah. So then you decided to go your own way, and this smaller family focused business here at Sideward. As you all were coming up with this plan to create your own brewery, what did that creative process look like? How did you decide what you wanted it to be, where it was going to be, and what you're going to make?
I mean, this space is designed for us. Here in Orlando, there was just nothing in the way of serving good beer, serving good food, playing rock and roll, just kind of that atmosphere that I wanted to hang in. So I think that we just saw that opportunity to let's create this space where we want to hang out, and hopefully people will come and enjoy beer, and they have, which is great.
Orlando's got a fantastic kind of musical, kind of creative scene. It's one that definitely flies under the radar, but it was a very formative one on me. In fact, even right now at the Orlando History Museum, there's a whole big installation about the 90s Orlando music scene, the bands, the designers, the concert promoters. And I mean, it's a significant thing, a very formative thing on my own kind of creative development. And I was lucky to grow up in that kind of environment, but it's a cool vibe in Orlando.
Oh, absolutely. I think it comes in waves. I think you have people that come in and are very motivated and very creative, and then maybe see bigger opportunities somewhere else. But it comes in waves. It's great at times, and then it takes a lull, and then someone else will come in and spark it up.
It's something that nobody thinks about, but the number of performers and talented musicians and creative people in this town is outsized because of theme parks. There are opportunities for people to work in creative fields, theater, music, et cetera, that don't exist in a lot of other towns or cities of this size of 2 million people or less. And so those people also need their own creative outlet in addition to those things that they make a living on out working in theme parks and whatnot.
Something that's definitely happened with the food scene is people will come and get jobs at Disney, but they kind of realize maybe that's not the space they want to. So I think downtown has attracted a lot of those people, and they've stayed. So I think that has made our scene even more on the food side, even more better on the food side, just because people are just come and stay and they enjoy it.
Sure. No, and there is, that you're right. That cuisine and creative culinary world is a big piece of this too. And again, some great restaurants and great restaurateurs and fantastic chefs here. So you decide to open up in that kind of milieu here, in this Milk District on the edge of downtown. How'd you decide what you guys were going to make?
We're fans of just beer in general. We still, I think I can speak for all of us, we still love it. It's what I drink solely.
Still love it.
Still love it.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
Although being in the industry, especially through the last pandemic, it could be enough to shred a lot of people's love.
Yes. It's beaten down a few people, which I feel bad. I see the light fading, but I still love it. Some days are tough, but man, I make beer for a living. It's not that bad. But we just really enjoy just old world drinkability. So yes, we make lagers. That's very hot right now, but it's something that we just love to have around. We're big fans of IPAs. Um, yeah, just kind of I hate to sound cliche, but we kind of make what we want to make. I mean, the customer demand is there, but we do it in a way that is right for us.
It helps to make something that you're passionate about, that you like drinking yourself,
Absolutely.
and tend to put more creative energy into that in order to do it well. Because if you're drinking it yourself, then you're also your own worst critic on it, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
And so you make a lot of IPAs. You do make pub styles, ESB, porter, alt beer. Even was once a more of a core beer for you. But there's a lot of IPAs.
Yeah. I still love them in all shapes and forms of what they come in now. But yeah, I'm still a big fan.
Sure, sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about how, what that approach looks like to IPA. Before we do that, supply chain challenges are here to stay for a while. So why not trust the experts to handle freight for your ingredients? Old Orchard has partnered with a leading logistics firm in the craft beverage industry to transport your craft concentrate blends. When you order 2 pails or more of concentrate from Old Orchard, you qualify for freight quotes from various carriers and can stay up to date on the status of your shipment. To get started on a freight quote for craft concentrates today, head on over to oldorchard.com/brewer. Also, packaging beer can be a daunting task, but buying cans shouldn't be. American Canning provides packaging supplies at competitive prices in order quantities catered to craft. Think single truckloads and half-height pallets rather than million can minimums. For a smooth packaging experience, also consider their ultra-compact single-operator canning machines. Pricing begins at $25,000 with quick 6 to 8 week lead times on most equipment. American Canning exists to help share your craft in cans. Learn more about their ecosystem of solutions at americancanning.com. So you decide to make some IPAs. Clearly you've made them in the past and in previous kind of brewing iterations. How do you decide to stamp a sideward kind of focus or creative stamp on the IPAs that you make?
I think bitterness is always kind of like a signature here. We enjoy it, but it also provides balance. It's
also a very warm environment here in Florida, and having more bitter beers, it helps them have some sort of crisp drinkability.
But just because it's warmer doesn't mean. I mean, the stout thing is big here.
That's true. It's true. Florida does love sweet and fruity.
Yes, they do. So we still kind of push that direction, but we tend to kind of come back to more drinkability. And I believe that IPA is meant to be bitter in some realm. So that's kind of like our signature maybe of just kind of keeping it big, bold, and in your face, but still keeping it quaffable, keeping it drinkable. Like, you want to make it so you have another pint.
You have to ride a fine line there, right? Between something that is interesting enough and attractive enough to bring them back, but also something that isn't going to immediately turn them off. It has to be, something big enough that it feels like it's different and interesting and compelling.
But I think the meter's coming back, right? I think all the brewers are drinking lagers now, right?
Sure.
So I think, all the brewers were drinking IPAs years ago, and that's what caught on. So I think the meter's coming back. I think we don't have to do those monster truck beers anymore. I mean, we still do. It's still fun every now and then, but I think they're excited about just beer and just drinking beer, and it doesn't have to have all these adjuncts anymore to be exciting.
Sure. So let's walk through your IPA process, and maybe we'll select an IPA that you might consider kind of a main, like a core piece of your IPA program. What's the IPA that you make more than any others?
Moon Boots definitely, but Moon Boots is we do. I think you have to do these days. Like, we do a range of IPAs. So we have Moon Boots is kind of like we call it an American IPA.
Yeah.
It's clear, it's bitter, but we try to push everything we add it just like we do the Hazy IPAs. But it's a staff favorite. It's our favorite. It's kind of our baby. But it's just drinkable. and it's just kind of old world but new world at the same time.
Well, that sounds interesting. So let's talk about this. So it's American. You don't really call it West Coast IPA, but you call it an American IPA.
It tilters on that. I like to say American IPA because it's West Coasty, but it's still pushing that kind of hazy IPA techniques, the new world techniques. So it's kind of, it doesn't fall into one specific. It doesn't fall into cold IPA. It doesn't fall into these things that we just refer to it as American IPA.
Well, that sounds like a great thing. So let's talk about building it. You know, where do you start where did you start with this recipe design? You know, formulating this idea of something that was going to be both accessible, but also have a, you know, bitterness and a crispness to it, you know, while it also expresses this kind of, you know, juicy new school flavor too.
So, I mean, to me, it's all about just showcasing the hops. So it's 98% Pilsner malt.
Yeah.
So just something.
Is there a specific Pilsner malt that you?
I'm a big fan of Wireman.
Sure.
Just I'm not going deep into the malt analysis, so I know they do great stuff. It hits the numbers every time, and it's just clean, and it's something I can rely on day in and day out.
So, you know, why that though over, you know, maybe some, you know, more domestic Pilsner?
I think I tend to like the character is kind of what I use when I came up.
Sure.
So it's worked. So I've never really steered away.
Fair enough. And I mean, it makes sense because you also brew lagers and
yeah, absolutely.
You know, that way that you've got, you know, a store of,
it has its not variables. It has its versatile.
Yeah.
In the sense that it is Pilsner lager specific malt, but I mean, we use it in most of our IPAs. And it's just very versatile.
So 98% is Pilsner malt. What's the rest?
There's a little bit of golden Echet oats in there just for body, just for a little bit of caramel, kind of that, you know, melanoidin kind of character.
Even at 2%, you can
just to round it out just a little bit.
Is it really perceptible though, even at that small percentage?
Maybe not. I don't. It's kind of just like a little bit of seasoning on there, you know.
Fair enough. You know, so as you get through, you know, a mash schedule on this, you've got a 2-vessel system back there. You know, what does mashing look like for you?
It's kind of just straightforward. It's just an infusion mash, nothing crazy. We would have liked to do some different things, but with our space we have, that's all we could fit. So, just straightforward, just infusion mash, just kind of on the lower end to kind of help dry that beer out.
Right.
We are starting to mash up a little bit to kind of create some, you know, to decrease some oxidation factors, some heavy metals, but also to push whatever thiol thing might be happening in there, just to help push any hop flavor we can in that beer.
Thiols are so hot right now.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that a little bit more because I know you've got you know, another beer on the menu, double hazy IPA that is all about the thiols, and you know, so we'll explore that a little bit. But so you go through a mash hop. How much of those hops end up in your mash hop?
Not much. We're doing probably 5 to 10 pounds or I'd say 5 pounds for that beer specifically. We're not really trying to push that thiol thing in that beer too hard.
And it's a 10-barrel brew system.
15.
Oh, 15. Okay.
So yeah, it's not much.
Yeah.
At all. Just trying to help build that flavor just in every step of that process. So it starts there.
Sure. Yeah. So through that mashing process, you know, through the hot side, where do you go from there?
It's kind of treated like a West Coast at that point. First wort, then an addition middle, and then whirlpool. So it's treated like old school. It's kind of to build that bitterness, to build that drinkability.
What are the hops in this?
It is mosaic focused.
Okay.
So it's pretty much a mosaic beer. There's some Vic Secret, there's some Eldorado, but it's mosaic focused beer through and through. So that big, juicy mango kind of tropical flavor is all on that backbone, and then kind of some other hops help build that and sustain that.
I want to talk a little bit more about that, but let's talk about that. You know, that first wort hop. Is this all still mosaic, or are you using something that's specifically bittering?
We have moved to the Flex. It's nice, clean. I was big fans of Incognito.
Yeah.
So I was, man, if they do that well, let's try this bittering product. And we've moved to it. It's just nice, clean bitterness, and it helps with efficiency, all the above, you know.
Sure. And a little bit of like that smooth, bitter hop character without all that extra vegetal matter that early in the hot side process. So you have how much of that goes in your 15 barrel batch? What's the IBU goal on this? Or do you even think about it?
It's absurd. It's like 62% alpha acids. Right. So you don't need much. We're putting anywhere from 100 grams to 175 grams per first wort. Right. It's literally nothing.
That's super efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for the beer itself, what's the general IBU goal? And I imagine this is all going to be calculated.
We try to push it to the higher end. I think it's around 70.
Yes.
Yeah. So
70 IBUs.
Yeah, it's big.
I haven't heard that number in a while.
Through some things, it's probably perceived as probably like 60, 50.
Sure.
But we're definitely pushing it. It's definitely in that old school kind of, bitterness.
Oh, it's so crazy that's old school.
Yeah,
because that seems really like it's kind of right where American IPA.
I think it's coming back. Cold IPA is helping that out.
Bringing bitterness back. I love it. So you start with first wort, and you said you have a 30-minute edition.
Somewhere around there. I can't think of it's 30, 15, somewhere around there of Simcoe, just to build that a little bit of a clean bitterness, but also
mid-boil hops.
Crazy.
Nobody does that anymore.
I know. But I it's just, as being an IPA lover, I think it's just trying to build on and just trying to get as much hop character you can in that beer without being 100 IBUs, blah blah blah.
Sure. What do you think that adds then? And it's a small edition, huh?
Yeah, I think it's 5 pounds.
Okay.
I think it just building on, adding just layers and layers. You may never really taste it, but I think it's there. I think it adds stepping stones to hold those other dry hops up, to hold those things up.
Sure. If you're building juicy, fruity characters in other kinds of ways, then that also creates that kind of, familiar touchstone, especially for older IPA drinkers who, may have a sense of what that used to be.
Yeah.
It's almost this a bridge to the, what's next, but it also feels familiar and comfortable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So then, what do the rest of the hot side hops look like?
Again, Mosaic focus. So I think it's, we've changed it up now. It's Mosaic, Incognito. Centennial Salvo. So all saturated with all this.
You guys are getting into all the advanced hop products.
I get excited, so we like to push the boundaries, and I've really dug them. I think it follows through fermentation, and you can taste it. It's there. It sticks around, and it's not in your face. You still need that dry hop, but you can use it, and you still get that Mosaic character through fermentation through the end.
So let's talk about are you adding those towards the end then, or
that's all whirlpool.
Okay. What's a whirlpool look like?
We cool down just a touch to bring out a little bit more fruitier flavors, but still.
What's just a touch?
200. Okay. So 12 degrees. So
that's barely below boiling where I'm come from.
Yeah.
It's funny. Over the last 2 weeks, I swear to God, I've had like 4 conversations about reduced temperature whirlpools, and it does seem like that trend has just been gripping the hoppier brewing world.
I think it helps. It helps bring out a little bit more of that fruity character that you're looking for, instead of that kind of more knowable, more vegetal, more resiny flavors. We still want those, but we prefer that tropical fruit cup. Those things. CIPing.
Hey, there's a brewery going on behind us, so it's these are the sounds. These are the real brewery sounds. So, so then how long do you whirlpool for?
We kind of do it as just enough to get.
And your boil off in general here in Florida, because it's a very humid environment, has to.
Not too much. We're doing anywhere from a half barrel to a barrel of boil off. Yeah. So it's nothing crazy.
Yeah. again, out in drier environments like Colorado,
that eats it up.
those things happen a little bit faster.
Yeah.
60-minute boil then, or
Yeah. Typically 60 to 90 minute on everything here.
Yeah.
Again, with the hazy IPA thing, that's kind of crazy these days, but we're still kind of stuck in that old world, hard and fast, true 60-minute.
Fair enough. So I'm sorry. How long was that whirlpool?
We're doing just long enough to create that whirlpool to kind of just not disturb all that stuff. We've tried to work so hard to get in there. So just as long as we need to. I think it's like 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the hop load.
Okay. So nice and quick then.
Yeah. As quick as we kind of, once that boil is over, we try to get it to the fermenter as fast as possible, just to kind of make sure all those hop components and all those malt characteristics are just as cool down as fast as possible.
Yeah, rapid and intense, but then try to hold them in the liquid and then get them into a fermenter where they're not gonna blow off super quickly.
Yeah,
sure. And then how does that entree into the cold side look?
We are a little bit more traditional in the sense that we kind of wait for fermentation to calm down. And then we'll start our dry hop process. But this is kind of when it takes the new school route. We double dry hopping, and kind of just massively loading that fermenter with cryo, with T90s. At I think Moon Boots is like 3 pounds per barrel at this point. So on the higher end.
Yeah. What do you ferment it with?
Right now, we've taken some things from hazy IPA, but we've also taken things from cold IPA. So I guess technically, I don't want to give out all the, didn't want to say this, but, technically it's a cold IPA. We don't like to call it that because
it's not a cold IPA because there's no adjunct in it.
I guess there you go.
There's no rice or corn, then it's not a cold IPA, right?
But it is.
I think that's a reasonable line to draw.
Yeah.
We are. Let me also back up to say that we have gotten that wrong at sometimes in the past also and categorized things as cold IPA just because of the lager yeast fermentation.
Yeah.
It's probably not the right thing to call it a cold IPA unless it's got a significant, 20+% of corn or rice in there to dry the beer out. So, but it's a lager yeast fermentation.
We took notes from kind of Pine House doing the Kolsch yeast thing, but also cold IPA. So yeah, right now I believe it is 3470 on the warmer side.
Okay.
But yeah, it's just.
It's a very Highland Park type approach to IPA fermentation.
Absolutely. But I think it just provides that clean backbone that just lets the hops just shine. And that's what that beer is about, is just trying to push that mosaic tropical thing in any way we can without any distraction, really.
Yeah, yeah. So when you say you ferment it warm, how warm is warm?
Low 60s.
Okay.
We'll probably knock out in probably like 55 and let it free rise up to like 60. I think towards the end it's hitting 63. But yeah, just as fast as we can with that.
So that's actually a little colder than some people are doing this then on their, with this similar IPA approach.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, bump up the temperature, get it out faster.
There you go. Is there anything particular to the way that you pitch this, given that it's still going to be?
No, we kind of treat it like we would Chico.
Okay.
It's kind of, in my mind, it is Chico to some extent. It's just old reliable. It does exactly what it does every time, and it's just clean and crisp. And I think that's why it's attracted me quite a bit.
Yeah. No, very cool. So then, it's a 3470 fermentation. I imagine, it's 10 days ish or so, mostly probably
pushing that.
Yeah. For primary. And then what's the dry hop? Like, what does then the process look like from there?
We got a small little hop cannon from Premier, and we've really dug that. I think it really gets. We were kind of doing the on top of the tank and then recircing, but I really think this hop cannon just gets it into saturation, and you kind of get more character out of it. So we're double dry hopping through that. It was a big learning curve.
Do you do this after yeast?
We drop yeast. We kind of do that old school. It finishes fermentation. We cool it down, pull yeast, and then dry hop. Which is crazy. That's such an old school thing, I feel like.
Well, I think it's funny how the old school is coming back into vogue because, especially as the research shows, and our friends at Omega have said the same kind of thing, that you're not going to get a lot from dry hopping while yeast is still in there unless you do it. I mean, obviously, as you know, like at the very, very start of like that first wort hop is actually going to have more impact on some of that. And then even still, like there's still going to be a little bit of yeast in there when your dry hop is in there. A little bit of biofuel.
It's still working. It's still working.
Yeah. But in that sense, being able to reuse that yeast and in front of the production brewery certainly has its own benefits.
Absolutely.
So you pull off yeast and then you go through a dry hop process using this cannon. So is that constantly then recirculating through the hop cannon, or are you blowing into a tank?
It's blowing up through the bottom of the tank, so it's just immediately getting in solution. Whereas if you were dry hop through the top, it's kind of just
it's got to sink down.
Yeah, it's got to sit there and kind of sink down through a few days, but still could kind of maybe those pellets could just kind of stay together where that hop cannon just blasts it right into the tank and it's just in solution right away.
Prepping for that has to involve, a lot of purging, I assume, in order to make sure you're not going to screw up your beer at that point.
It is a little bit of a longer process, but I think that's something we've catered our process to now, and we just expect that. The big learning curve. I mean, when we first got it, it was a mess. We were dry hopping all day. Sometimes, just some of those hop cakes we created, but now it's just kind of just a part of our day, or it's a routine. It is a smaller vessel, so it's a 30-minute purge. It's nothing,
right.
But my assistant we're kind of just in tune, and it's part of the day now. So,
what were some of the earlier mistakes that you were able to fix in using the hop cannon?
Everyone tries to make on the sales sheets, add 44 pounds. It can fit. It's like, no. That's probably the biggest hop cake I've made in my life, and very expensive hops. And it was not a fun day, but they got in the tank finally. But it was a very stressful day.
So that's now why you double dry hop instead of trying to get it all into one dry hop.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What does that look like? You push all of these into your dry hop, and then how long does that then rest?
We're doing 24 to 48 hours, and then the second dry hop, and then the same process. We'll give it a day or two, and then kind of crash that afterwards.
Do you pull that first dry hop out of the tank before you launch the second?
We do.
Okay.
Back when we first started, we were kind of.
So you get to lose beer twice in this process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
but when we first started, we were having some issues with some hop creep. So we found that does help. Since we've started dry hopping a little bit cooler and dumping those hops, we haven't had any issue lately, or since we started doing that a few years ago. So, we were having a lot of hop creep problems back in the day, but those have been solved.
Just by dropping out the first batch before you put the second batch in.
Yep.
And the second one's also 24 to 48 hours.
Yep.
How do you know when it's done? Are you tasting these and kind of evaluating, or do you just now have a program down that you're comfortable with?
It's a little bit of both. I always pull samples and give them a smell and just kind of see where they're going. Obviously taking all the rest of the tests. And then on the same side, it's just it's also a cycle. You kind of know,
right?
As long as it's smelling good and looking good, it's pretty much good.
You got a rhythm to it.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, I want to change gears and talk about Hazy IPA and maybe even Hazy double IPA, especially this because you are definitely pushing, kind of a thiol focus in some of the hazier side of your IPAs. Before we do that, ABS Commercial is a full-service brewery outfitter proud to offer brew houses, tanks, and small parts to brewers across the country. They stock equipment ranging from 3 barrels to 90 barrels and offer custom-designed equipment up to 900 barrels. Contact one of their brewery consultants today at sales@abs-commercial.com to discuss your brewery project. ABS Commercial, we are brewers. Also, craft the perfect pour with superior fruit from the perfect puree. Picked at the peak of ripeness, the fruit is pureed and frozen for optimal fresh flavor and color. But don't just take their word for it. Experience flavor firsthand by curating your own complimentary sample box at perfectpuree.com/beer. That's perfectpuree, PUREE.com/beer. Samples are complimentary for brewing professionals only. All right, Garrett, let's talk about Hazy IPA and some of the more, I don't want to call them left field, but some of the more intensely hop flavored processes that you're now diving into, especially trying to optimize thiol, using thiol optimizing yeast, and then using various kinds of products, hop products, but also things like Phantasm to drive this kind of contemporary hop character. What beer should we talk about and related to that?
We've done a few. The one we have now is Affinity for the Unattainable. Hence the name. We're trying to put everything. Is that big, bold, just intensely aromatic? Is that possible? And we're really chasing that. So
there's a threshold there where it becomes harder and harder to actually push past it. That you work with the dynamics of flavor, fluid, and aroma compounds. And at some point you keep trying to add more, and it just starts taking away rather than adding to that. Yeah. So finding ways to again kind of heighten the ceiling on that. It's the holy grail for most brewers these days.
Yeah. So this beer we try to throw
like loudness, like can you push more intensity because there's still a volume level.
At a certain point it hurts.
Yeah.
Right.
Or there's a certain point where if in order to get that loudness higher, you start compressing the dynamic range. And I'm going to use my music metaphor here. You start compressing that dynamic range so much that you end up with a thin and tinny but loud sound rather than this full thing. And so building that full spectrum where it's fully supported and you're still getting that bass and the highs and the mids, but pushing that loudness, like that's what great mastering can do. You're trying to figure out a way to to kind of push that intensity without screwing the entire mix up.
Yeah, absolutely. So this beer we tried to just collect as much information as we could and just push everything we could at it. Cryo, Phantasm, Cosmic Punch, hop oils, double dry hopping, all the above, mash hopping. And it's
so is this just a double IPA similar base to your regular IPAs?
So, this one it's got oats, wheat to build that big juicy body.
Higher percentage of those, I assume.
A little bit, but still Pilsner malt base, but supplemented with those flaked oats, malted wheat. Yeah, just to build that this big juicy body to give just all those hops something to hold on to.
Sure. What percentage is Pilsner and what percentage are those other three?
I think we're pushing between all the adjuncts. We're pushing between 25% and 30%. I'm a fan of oats. I like to push it a little harder than maybe my assistant likes.
Sure.
But I
somehow those beers don't end up on the schedule the day that you're on the brew deck.
Weird,
right?
Weird, right?
Yeah, surprising.
But I'm a big fan. They just provide a different flavor, almost like a creamy, like peaches and cream kind of feel.
Yeah.
And I enjoy it.
So then hops become the giant differentiator in their past mash. What's the hop character? Where do you start with this new school approach to hop products and trying to find these most advanced ways of pushing hop flavor in this beer? This is a double IPA, 8%ish.
Yeah, 8%. We get excited just when something comes around, or new things come on board, and we hop on board pretty fast. I just get excited about it. So I think it's different in the sense it's more traditional hazy. There is a little bit of first wort just to kind of add some balance, but it's hazy IPA in the sense of it. The whirlpool is cooled down. We're adding as much as our kettle can handle on a hot side, and whirlpool and then it's mainly just dry hop driven.
So a little bit of first wort, and then all whirlpool, nothing in between.
Nothing in between. Yeah.
And then what's going in the whirlpool, and I guess we could talk about what that blend looks like, hot side then on cold side.
This beer was on the cold side. We had read about all these survivable compounds and hop oil, so we overloaded the whirlpool with Centennial Salvo, Mosaic. I think Mosaic Cryo, and then Phantasm. I'm sure there was Incognito in there somewhere, but we just tried to overload all these hops that were high in survivables that we knew could just stand up to the heat, but then also fermentation, and just try to throw everything we could at it on the hot side as we could.
Yeah. How much of the total hop, or like, do you have an idea of what the total hop load would be for something like this, and how much ended up in the whirlpool versus the dry hop?
I don't, because I don't know how to calculate what the T90 version would be compared to the oil.
Sure.
We have pushed it.
It's so much math.
Yeah, and that's not my strong suit. We have pushed it a little bit with some collabs we've done. We've done like 4 kilograms in a 15-barrel batch, and that tended to work out. I typically don't push it that hard, but it was a triple IPA, so it was a little bit bolder, a little bit bigger, that could stand up to all that oil in the whirlpool.
Let's talk about using that in the whirlpool. Like, you've got a flowable hop product. There's some techniques that you use to kind of make sure that gets incorporated well, and that doesn't get wasted. I mean, it's also a very expensive product because it's so highly focused, and so you want to find ways to make sure that you're using all of it that you're putting into that on the hot side.
Something that's really worked well for us is waiting for that kind of that cone to surface, and then dumping all that Incognito right in the center of that cone, and tends to help. Just when we were first using it, it would kind of stick. It would kind of rise to the top and stick to the side of the kettle.
Yeah.
But we found that putting it in the center of that whirlpool, it just kind of just gets in solution and stays in solution. But we're big fans. I found that it just kind of lasted. You could kind of tell. You could taste it post fermentation, and it was true to style, as in Citro, Mosaic, or whatever it was. And you could just taste it in the final product post fermentation.
So you push all of this in the whirlpool. Is it a similar kind of cooler whirlpool temperature, drop down to around 200?
Yeah. For all of our IPAs, we're cooling down to a certain degree, some more than others. But yeah, we were just driving that fruity tropical flavor, and that helps.
Yeah. When you think about bitterness, because now you're throwing a whole bunch of hops now on the hot side, and even at that temperature, you're still going to isomerize some. You're still going to get a lot of measurable bitterness, in addition to perceptible bitterness.
For me, that's welcomed.
Yeah.
You still have to play. Obviously, it's coming into play, so you adjust for it. Where the first word is minuscule. It's there because I like it there, but also it's still adding some bitterness. But we expect to gain some bitterness in the whirlpool.
How do you calculate for that? If you put 0 minutes on most brewing software, it's just gonna give you no IBUs. So
I like to put the minute edition in there. Sometimes it's scary to do that because it'll give you some crazy output. But I think it's just kind of tested over time, and just kind of we know what to expect from our system. And like I said, it's welcome to some extent. So yeah, we just kind of have an idea of what to expect.
When you let me jump ahead, but what is something like this 8% double IPA, hazy IPA finish at in terms of gravity?
We prefer the drier side. This beer I think is on the sweeter side a little bit. So I think I prefer to finish at 4 for some of these bigger IPAs that we're really pushing the hop load in on the dry hop. But I think this one finished a little sweeter at 4.5. Something like that, but it's massively dry hop, so that body was welcomed
for an 8% beer with this that also has this significant amount of bitterness in it, because this is a bitter beer also, in addition to being a juicy beer, which is what I enjoy about it. That carries both of those elements of a fruit.
Exactly.
That if I'm eating an orange is a very common flavor here in Florida because they grow a shitload of them around here. People are all very, familiar with, especially with fresh oranges. And, there's a sweetness and there's also a pithy bitterness to it. And all of those things work in conjunction with each other, and this captures both sides of that, both that bitterness and the sweetness.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And 4 to 4.5 it sounds strangely conservatively dry in this world
weird.
of hazy
weird,
double
right?
IPA. Strangely enough. Sure. So then let's talk about cold side hopping on something like this. Again, you're using a lot of advanced hop products, flowable hop products on the hot side and whirlpool. What does the cold side then look like this? And Phantasm, I should say, on top of that.
Similar to what we're talking about with our Moon Boots IPA.
Is there anything to the way they use Phantasm in there? Is it just an addition that sets in there and, that finds some footing in fermentation?
We've only explored it in the whirlpool. We have not dry hopped with it quite yet.
That is how they suggest. They suggest using a hot side rather than trying to dry hop or cold side with it.
They do say you can kind of have some of those Nelson characters, Sauvignon Blanc characters post, or like mid fermentation. Is just something for some reason we haven't explored yet. I think maybe it's just more my traditional. Let's just load it up with as much hops as we can.
Sure.
Dry hop for this beer is the similar process to Moon Boots.
What yeast are you using for you're using Cosmic Punch?
Yeah, we are using Cosmic Punch. As far as my education is aware that you kind of have to have these modified yeast to bring out those, to really consume and biotransform those phantasms and those hop compounds.
If you want to get anything out of it, right? Like why use it if you're not going to go do that?
That's my education on it.
Yeah. So you use Cosmic Punch and it behaves like a typical kind of London Ale 3.
As expected, but kind of it's just more aromatic and just in your face. And I feel like it's just jumping out of the glass when we made that switch to that yeast.
Yeah. And then, so what does dry hop look like for it?
Same process as we were talking about earlier, double dry hop through the hop cannon. But where it would change on this one, using just kind of all the big boy hops. We've got Nectaron, we've got Galaxy, we've got Citra Cryo. Just trying to throw everything we could at it and just try to make it the biggest, juiciest, tropical guava mango fruit cup thing you could have.
Sure. So no flowable hop products on this side.
Not yet. We are looking kind of to explore that. I think we've through your magazine we'd read about what North Park is doing. So we're looking to explore that.
That Kelsey guy, he's crazy.
Yeah, I haven't had any of these beers. Please send me some.
And now, of course, we're seeing the advent of new flowable, dry hop focused, cold edition products, which I think is the next phase for that, right?
We have used Spectrum a little bit. I do like it. I think it gives a more of a raw, like a wet hop character. So I think we've used it a few times. I don't think it's in Affinity. But I like to use it as like a layer builder because it has that more like fresh hop, raw character that I think I enjoy. It's just I don't think it's something that's going to replace like we've used Incognito kind of maybe to replace some of the T90 in the whirlpool.
Right.
I just don't think Spectrum is going to replace T90 or Cryo. As
sure. But it sounds interesting as a layer that you might add in to add an extra element of depth to it. Yeah. Sure. Use any of the 301 fresh hop pellets?
Not yet.
All right. So what's the dry hop process look like? And obviously you're mixing T90 and cryo. You just do normal math on that. What's your substitution rate tend to look like just mentally or within your software? I've
never looked at it as substituting. I've always looked at it as trying to get as much flavor as we can in this beer. So we're kind of, I like the flavor of T90. I think we all grew up on it, right? So it has that a little bit of nostalgia and what you're looking for, but that cryo just kind of helps just drive that character throughout that beer and just kind of push that aroma out of the glass.
When you're blending T90s and cryo, how would you typically think about that from a creative standpoint? Like, because you want to capture some of that familiar kind of T90 character. Do you go half, or is there some kind of like threshold of T90 that you want in there just to?
I think not everything is cryo available quite yet. I think those things are coming, but like with the Nectaron, with the Galaxy, they need that Citra, they need that Mosaic as just a base builder. So if we can throw those in as cryo and add that really, really solid base, it just pushes that Nectaron and that Galaxy just through the top.
Yeah. How do you think about building these hop blends? That, it sounds like you're using a lot here and there's a lot of moving pieces, coming at it, like thinking like a chef. You've got a whole bunch of moving pieces here, but they've all got to figure out how to work and complement each other and kind of, sync up in this kind of broader orchestrated kind of flavor. How do you?
I think people get really technical about it. I think I'm just trial by fire or trial by error. We found some that were great. But we did a beer that was some of my favorite hops, Simcoe and Vic Secret, that just didn't really work well together. But it's trial by fire, and we try to mix it up, keep it fresh. But we have found there are some that work better together than others.
What are some of your favorite hop combos?
I hate to say it, but Citra, I think it's just such a good base builder. Nectaron has kind of surprised me. We're using quite a bit of that.
What is it about Nectaron, and how do you find ways to bring out the best of Nectaron?
We just got it in, so we've done Affinity and then another beer with it. So I think it's Citra similar in the sense that it punches through. It's just a good. It showcases itself well when you put it in there, and just kind of like Galaxy, just you can tell that it's in there and it's very specific, and I don't know, it's new too, so it's exciting.
Sure. So those are they all fit what some folks might call cheater hops. Like they're the hops where if you throw them in, they're just going to taste good.
Yeah.
What are your point guard hops? What are those kind of supporting actor hops that help bring out some of the really exciting character of those leading star hops?
Like I said, Citra's always a good support. I mean, you can throw it in there 100% and it's gonna be good. But I kind of like to add a little bit of Citra, a little bit Mosaic, to kind of just give it that underlying, to showcase some of the other big stars in there. And I think those are always.
So you use Citra as a supporting hop too, then?
Most often. Sometimes, like with Moon Boots, Mosaic is the focus, the focus driver, and those it has other supporting characters in there. But for the most part, I think you kind of need those cheater. I mean, they work. So I mean, let's be honest. That's why we're using them.
Hey, no complaints from me.
Yeah.
But cheater hops, that's a pejorative term, obviously. They're just
they work. What are you going to do?
I guess the hop butcher guys would call them bangers. Those are our bangers,
Yeah.
But at the same time, right, finding those kind of layers in there, also help support and heighten the awareness of some of those.
But we've circled
big, beautiful hops.
We've circled back around to Centennial. That was a big hop we used at our last brewery, and just kind of faded out for me. And I don't know why, but we've started to bring that back. I think it adds just a little bit of that nostalgic character, but we've learned that it's a good hop. And
you're using Centennial, but in a more, in a different format even now too.
Even on the whirlpool side, yes. But then we started to add a little bit of Centennial, a little bit of Cascade, just to kind of, they work and they're good and they're classic, and they add these multiple layers. They're not often the showcase, but they're still in there. They're still helping support the banger hops, like the guys that are there to really just punch you in the face.
Sure. But I like that layered approach, and I think that it makes for drinkable beers that also feel connected to some broader idea of
the subconscious, or
it's like an artist using a specific hue that another historical artist has used, and you see that, and like it just brings back an echo and feels familiar.
Absolutely.
And feels connected to this kind of thing, and makes it even if it pushes off, branches out into some new space of artistic aesthetic expression, it still feels grounded in this other thing, and connected to that. And so you build the new from the old, and kind of build this spectrum of connectivity between those things.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, we've talked a lot about IPA. Is there another beer style that's really close to your heart that you want to talk about before we wrap this up?
We're big fans of lager. I think it's just kind of, again, falls into that nostalgic. It's where we all grew up. That's how we got started drinking beer. We do a beer here called Punks in the Waiting Room. It's kind of based in the Italian Pilsner, kind of still in that hoppy realm, but it's just drinkable. It's just our go-to fallback beer when everything else is just too much.
Well, what's your approach to this kind of Italian style or Italian-ish, Pilsner?
We kind of step mash it.
Let me guess, you use Wireman pills.
Weird, right? Actually, it's Wireman. It is the Arachella.
The Pilsner. Okay. Yeah.
So again, Italian malt, building the blocks to make it more Italian. Step mashed for just to help dry this beer out. That's really as complex as it get. I wish we could do other things, but
sure,
it's what we have.
There's no decoction happening back there. No.
We thought about it, but
that's all right. I was just talking to Dustin at Roadmap, who won a gold medal for their all right American style or international style Pilsner. And, it's a single infusion, not even step mashing. And you can make great beers in a whole bunch of different ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's all different ways you can add complexity, but I think tried and true infusion works, and we don't have any option to do anything else, so it is what it is.
Sure. So then, what does the rest of it look like?
Traditional kind of lager. It's again, I hate to say it's like kind of like IPA-esque, but we kind of multiple additions throughout the boil just to build that noble character. It is middle fruit and saphir just through and through.
Okay.
Throughout the hot side and cold side. We dry hop just a little bit just to kind of amp that aroma up just a touch.
With the same hops?
With the same hops, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just kind of classic, German style pills with a little bit of a dry hop.
Well, thank you for making an Italian style pills using exactly what the Italians would or I shouldn't say the Italians, I should say what Tipo pills or Birrificio Italiano would actually do, which is using German noble hops.
Between Tipo,
there's such a it's interesting to see how many people's Italian style pilsners are using hops that probably don't fit within that definition and could probably fit within some other idea.
Between Tipo and Pivo, those were big influences on this beer. And
you've got the Saphir. There it is. There's your Pivo influence.
Big influences. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just kind of old world German style Pilsner, just with a little bit of kind of like new world, just kind of keep the new customers excited. The new guys coming into the craft beer scene is like, they want something that's nice and, reminiscent of their European styles, but has just more character going on and more
just a little bit more.
Yeah,
just needs a little bit extra. Sure. Well, let's zoom out here. Let's talk about the big picture. What are your goals for Sideward? What do you all hope to achieve? What's that long-term success look like for you all, and when will you know that you get there? And I should say, like, you opened a year before the pandemic started. Like, you're only really at this point, even 4 years in, settling into what things could actually or should actually look like now. I know we're looking off in the future, and this is a ways away potentially at this point. But what do you hope to achieve with this brewery?
I think just bringing more attention to just, Orlando has always been the underdog. So bringing more attention here, getting people to come get excited to check us out, check the city out. People often think of the Mouse. We are very, very far removed from that, distance-wise, but also culturally. So we've got it coming. We've got it going on. So come see us. Come spend some time in Orlando and For the brewery,
you're right. There's a great piece of this. There's a great piece of Orlando outside of the theme parks.
Yeah.
So if you can get out of the theme parks, get into downtown, like there's great restaurants, there's great bars, there's great places to drink beer. There's some cool stuff to explore out here.
Absolutely.
And, yeah.
For the brewery, I think we don't have the vision of the 100-barrel system, that I think those days are gone. But I think just trying to just make the best beer we can, and if it ends up going that way, great. But if we stay small and nimble and humble, and we're happy to stay here as well.
Well, there's a cool style and attitude and point of view to the beer that you make that feels like you guys, and it feels like you have this kind of aesthetic stamp on what you do. It's a great place to drink beer, and the beers themselves are delicious. Everyone should come check us out. And I think that's a great place to wrap this up. For nearly 30 years, G&D Chillers has set the mark for quality equipment you can rely on. ProBrew has the equipment, systems, and technology to take your brew to the next level. Trust the experts at Old Orchard to handle freight for your craft concentrate blends. American Canning provides packaging supplies at competitive prices in order quantities catered to craft. ABS Commercial is a full-service brewery outfitter for breweries across the country, and craft the perfect pour with superior fruit from the perfect puree. Of course, if you enjoy this podcast, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button. Let us know that this content matters to you. Garrett, if people want to learn more about Sideward or come check you out and come drink some of the beers themselves, where do they find you all?
Classic social media. We're all over Instagram, Facebook, sidewardbrewing.com. We're right in the heart of the Milk District, right in downtown Orlando. So please look us up, Google, all the above.
A little bit of metal, a little bit of rock and roll, a little bit of edge. There's a nice style to Sideward, and of course the beers themselves have that same kind of energy, that same kind of rock and roll, that same kind of disregard for authority. Yeah. And let's make this fucking rock. Hey, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Hey, thanks for coming by.
Yeah, cheers. This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com, or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.